Okay, let me just briefly introduce you. So I had just told the students that today we're looking at what it's like to work in the Department of Defense, and you both work in the General Counsel's office. And Taylor Farrell has served as, is serving as the Deputy General Counsel. Is it for the Environment, Energy, and Installations? Okay.
You got it. You got it.
And he's been there since 2021, but prior to that, from 2009 to 2016, he served with the Department of the Navy as a special counsel and trial attorney. Andrea Basaraba, is that right, Andrea? Basaraba?
Yeah.
Okay. She's somewhat new to the Department of Defense, and she serves as a special assistant to the DoD General Counsel. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to let them each take a turn in sharing their story about their career path. And then we will invite them to describe what their jobs are like and the pros and cons of their jobs, and then give them an opportunity to give you maybe some tips or points on what they learned in the whole process. And then we'll open it to questions. So why don't we start with either one of you? Who would like to go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Good.
Well, hello, everyone. Again, my deep apologies for being late, but I'm really happy to be able to join you today. I'm Taylor Farrell. I'm currently the Deputy General Counsel for Environment, Energy, Installations. I'm a political appointee with the Biden administration. I've been here since the beginning of the administration in 2021. Just briefly, my career high points, I guess, are I've been out about 20 years from law school, so a bit long in the tooth these days. But most of my career has been in public service with the federal government. I started out as an associate in a law firm, but came in with the Obama administration to the Pentagon in 2009. And I've been with the federal government ever since. In between my two stints as political appointees, I was actually a career lawyer at the Department of Justice. So I did about 5 years stint in between the Democratic administrations in which I've served. So I have some viewpoints on both sides, both as a political appointee, but also as a career lawyer at DOJ. And I'm happy to kind of get into the distinctions between those and the relative pluses and minuses in both. As far as what I do now, my clients are generally senior policymakers within the Pentagon on the issues of environmental law, energy, and installations. When we say installations, that means all of our bases, all of DoD's bases worldwide. So all of the real property issues, real estate issues, construction issues, anything that relates to the physical aspects of the base or the buildings on the base. Our office deals with the legal issues related to that. As far as, well, I'll hold off advice maybe till later. I can kind of get a feel as to what you're interested in. So I'll turn it over to Andrea now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Taylor. My name is Andrea Basaraba, and as Linda kindly mentioned, I'm currently serving as a special assistant to the DoD GC. I'm only about 4 years out of law school, so much closer to you all in terms of age and experience. I spent a year after law school clerking on the Third Circuit, and then spent about a year and a half or so at a law firm doing corporate work in DC, and then transitioned over to DoD to my current role. Unlike Taylor, I'm not a political appointee, so I am in a career position here. My day job mostly consists of various elements of supporting the general counsel and her work and her engagements. So that can range from, helping put together meeting preparation and materials to researching certain substantive topics that could come up. Part of what I like about it is that I don't have a specialty or a focus. I could really be working on anything, any day of the week, depending on what's going on that day. So hopefully that's a good broad start to the introduction, but happy to get more detailed, answer any questions y'all might have.
Well, let me also ask you each, how did you choose your career path? How did you decide to go into government and was there one or two key elements that got you focused on that?
You want to go first?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. So I knew even throughout law school, and I did a master's degree in government before law school, that I was interested in government service, focused on national security, foreign affairs, sort of writ large. And DC seemed like the natural place to be for that sort of interest set after law school. And then from there, when I got here, obviously I was in the private sector to begin with, but some advice that I received early on was that if I was interested in government work, to just apply really, really widely. And I took that advice and kind of ended up in my current position, but really applied to a variety of different positions across government, hoping to just get into the door and start working, because I'm also, in the beginning of my career, so hoping to have as broad of experiences as possible.
Yeah, and similarly here, I had always had government service, at least in the back of my mind, as something that I wanted to do. I went to law school in Mississippi, and when I graduated, started practicing in Mississippi as well. So it was pretty far away from that at one point. I was, generally pretty happy with my job at a law firm. But I knew that this is something that I wanted to do with my career. So I just quit my job and moved to DC without knowing anybody or having a job, and spent the next year or so trying to kind of find my way around DC, getting to understand different opportunities. I did an LLM up here to kind of give me some time and some space to do that. And then while I ended up going to another law firm for a few years, again, I always kind of had that as a goal. And as Andrea said, I cast a wide net, so wide that I have cast both the career side and the political side. I remember distinctly being when I was up here in DC doing my LLM, I was a member of some group. I think it was like Young Lawyers in Foreign Policy or something like that. And there was a luncheon we had with, I believe he was the Deputy Treasury Secretary, and this would have been in the W. Bush years. And he said at the time, he said, you need to choose one or the other. Either you try to be a political appointee or you try to be a career appointee, and you need to put all your focus on that. I did not take that advice, obviously, because I've done both. But yeah, I mean, it's to Andrea's point, casting a wide net. There are a lot of government jobs out there. They're not all in the places that you think of immediately. So I think that's a great starting piece of advice to really be creative in places that you look and things that you want to do. And obviously you want to try to have that dovetail with your particular interest, subject matter interest. But there's a lot of different really interesting jobs in the federal government. So I think that's a great piece of early advice.
So somebody had asked earlier before you joined us whether it's how you get your job. Do you go through USA, the website, or is it through people you know? How do you work that?
So for career jobs, the career job I got was through USA Jobs, and it is a often accused of being an opaque process, a black hole of sorts, but I can testify that, it's how I got my job. I don't know if that's how you got your job, Andrea, but it is a system that works. Always helpful to complement that with any personal connections that you have, whether it's in an agency or elsewhere. At different parts of the hiring process, always beneficial to have someone, making a plug into someone who's on the hiring committee with the respective federal agency. So again, that's a great strategy to do both, to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I agree, and that's how my process started too, is either websites or USA Jobs, and I think the two really complement each other because sometimes USA Jobs can be hard to kind of search through, and so I'd actually applied to and gotten a different position in government, and then kind of had met some people and found out about this position, and then I applied to this one as well. But I think the two really complement each other in terms of scouring USA Jobs, which isn't the most fun task, but being open to it, and then talking to as many people, even who you meet along the way in those processes, who can kind of point you in the right direction to other ideas you may not have had, or other openings that you may not have seen.
Yeah, good. I also think it's important for new students seeking jobs, graduating students, to not be timid about seeking the attention of the office that you want. There's an inclination to say, oh, I submitted my resume, but I don't want to bother them. And, they said, wait 3 weeks and I don't want to really push myself. I find the opposite true because I've hired a number of attorneys in my life, and the person who is present and really cares and shows that this is something that's really important to them, they get attention. It's just the nature of the way we operate. So once you have somebody you can connect with individually, I think it's also important to not be shy about showing your interest in that job and following up. Because it's also a great characteristic to take into your work. So if you're like that, your job wants people like that. So.
I 100% agree. I was on the hiring committee when I was at DOJ. I have some opportunities to hire people now, although I have a very small office. But particularly when I was at DOJ, I mean, we always had a lot of great candidates on paper. So it's kind of hard to distinguish between them sometimes. And one thing that we always look for and talked about when we were in our hiring committee meetings is who really wants to be here, and who expressed that, and who made that come across, whether it's in an interview or in offline communications and expressions of interest, things like that. It stands out. Very unlikely that that would have a negative effect, that it would turn someone off. Again, I think that much more likely that that the interest and the enthusiasm would be noted. So I agree with that.
So can you share what your day-to-day life is like working in the general counsel's office at DOD? What are you called upon to do on a pretty regular day?
So my day is very tied to my boss's day. So a lot of it will depend on what her schedule looks like for the day. Generally, it means being aware of sort of what meetings she has coming up, what sort of items I should make sure that she's flagged or someone has followed up on prior to those meetings, in addition to keeping track of really high priority substantive items. I don't have any sort of real set schedule of my own besides trying to track my boss's schedule and make sure that she's prepared for to the most that I can help with, making sure that she's prepared for her meetings. And that is part of the excitement about it. It's definitely not for everyone. I think some people like more structure, and it's very different than jobs I've had in the past. For example, clerking was a very structured, very predictable, very regimented job in a sort of way. And that was really fun when I did it as well. But it's completely different from my day-to-day now, which is completely unpredictable. And maybe I plan to work on something at 2 p.m., but then something else comes up and now I'm working on 3 different things. And you definitely have to have the personality to want to do that and to like it. And I do. I've learned, through the course of the last few years that I like working on a lot of different things at once. And part of the excitement for me is not necessarily knowing what I'll be working on tomorrow. So there's not like a structured day-to-day, but in general, it has to do with helping solve any problems that come up.
And what percentage of your work that you do are legal issues versus versus just public relations or other types of issues? What's like hardcore legal work that you have to do?
So most of the work that I do is probably legal work, just because most of the work that the GC is doing is legal work. So a lot of it's helping, for example, distill legal issues down into talking points for certain meetings, which requires understanding what's actually happening in the world, what are the associated legal issues with that problem, and what does my boss need to know for her meeting. So it's kind of a 3-step process in that way. I haven't necessarily thought about it that way before, but I think that's a good way to characterize it. In my current role, I also do, in terms of non-legal work, I do a fair amount of speech writing, which is a little bit new for me, but that's a lot of the speeches have a legal angle. So sometimes that's legal-ish, but not necessarily, practicing law in the traditional sense. But I've really enjoyed that experience too.
Great. And what's your day like, Taylor?
Yeah, so I would say my day to day is very client focused. Like for instance, when I have an appointment to get to and I can't get out of a meeting because my client needs me there, that would be an example of that. So it's very much what I would believe to be the model of an in-house counsel. So the company here is DoD. And the clients, rather than businessmen or women, are the policymakers who are making various decisions about the department and engaging in various negotiations with interagency or with industry. So it's very client driven. My day-to-day agenda is generally what the client needs on a day-to-day basis, whether that's supporting them in meetings or getting ahead of any legal issues that need to be figured out before they can tee up the policy decisions. But then there's also, as with in-house counsel, you're kind of wearing 2 hats at a time. You're always wearing your legal hat, but because you're in these meetings where decisions are being made, you're often asked to give strategic advice that's not necessarily black and white, balls and strikes on the legal front, but what's the strategic thing to do? What's the best thing to do? What's the second order and third order effect of these decisions we're trying to make? And because we are trained, at least, to think analytically in those terms, I think that we generally have a place. Whether I do that well or not, it's for someone else to say. But I think that's generally a welcome perspective to have, and the lawyers in not just DoD but other federal agencies who are effective can do a little bit of both of those. Just to kind of zoom out a little bit, I think when you're talking about federal government lawyer work, basically have DOJ, which litigates cases, and then you have agency counsel who are doing what Andrea and I are doing, which are more on the policy side. Generally, we don't litigate. I work with DOJ and again, provide strategy for them, particularly since I used to be there. But that's one thing that we don't do day to day within the department generally.
So what would you say is 1 or 2 of the most important skill sets that you bring to your jobs that somebody should have in the kind of position you have?
So I think, I'm not sure this is a skill or not. Well, I'll start with the skill and then I'll answer the question a little bit differently. So first skill would be writing, as being a
Thank you.
Hopefully
all the time with
yeah.
a lot of students.
Yeah, and there's really no substitute for that. We do so much of it, and it's so important to write well and clearly, and it makes everything else work better. It makes you so much more effective, when you write well, and it makes your clients be more effective in what they do. So that would be the first skill that I would talk about. The second is not really a skill, or maybe it's a learned skill, is being over prepared for everything. is trying to be the most prepared person in the room at a given time. I know that I'm not going to be the smartest person in any room that I'm in, but I can at least try to be the most prepared every meeting that I go in, and that's something that I learned when I was a younger lawyer in my kind of first term around here. Is figuring out how to again kind of stand out. I mean, one way to stand out is to be nice and cordial, but another is to really be prepared to know answers to questions that may come up that other people don't know, and that's when you start to kind of build some recognition. This person, we can rely on him or her. We can trust them because we know they're going to put in the work and be prepared.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those. I'll add a couple of my own, but I have a story about that too that I could share on preparedness. I learned that actually at my 1L summer. I spent a summer at the California Attorney General's office. One of the unique opportunities there was the opportunity for law students to actually argue appeals in the California Court of Appeal. And so it was my first time, obviously, arguing in court, and I was, as you can all imagine, extremely nervous. And I had prepared a lot, and the office did a really good job of preparing you. They did some moots, and you had access to resources from students who had to kind of go through the same process before. But I think I learned the value of over preparation very early. I remember having a conversation with one of my advisors about, one of the cases we cited a case that cited a case that cited a case. And I said, well, I don't really understand this 4th level case. What actually happened here? And she says, oh, you don't need to know about that. And I thought, oh, how can she be so sure? But okay. And I had thankfully read it. And actually in our argument, I got a very active panel, and one of the judges asked me about that very case. And so I felt very lucky that I had found it and that I had read it. But that sort of unpredictable nature of questioning, whether it's in court or whether it's your client, I think is what Taylor's getting at. I think a healthy curiosity about the issues that you're dealing with really helps, because then it feels less like work and more like, well, how would I think about this if I were the client or if I were the judge or the decision maker? And that really carries over no matter what kind of law you're doing. I completely agree with the value of good writing. I think in general, being an effective communicator is really important, not just in the written word, but also, when you're talking to somebody. In my current job, as in Taylor's, there's often a lot of time constraints. And so being able to very clearly and concisely and effectively convey to what your client or your principal or whoever it is that you're doing work for exactly what the issue is and what they need to know, making sure you include everything that they need to know, but nothing extraneous, is definitely a skill that is learned over time, but it's a very important one.
It is.
And that takes good judgment, which also is trained over time and through experiences. And you're not going to have it perfectly on day one. I certainly didn't and still don't, but you can learn it for sure. And I think something, especially whether it's in a law firm or here, I'd add another skill set is just generally being organized. I mean, something that people expect you to do as a young lawyer is to keep track of your own work. And when someone asks you to do something, to do it, or if you can't do it, tell them that you can't do it and not let them find out that you couldn't do it because you didn't do it. And now it's been a month and nobody did it. So generally being organized and effectively communicating what it is you're working on, I'd say, is also really important.
Right. I think that's so good to say if you can't do it, and also if you don't know something. It's okay to say you don't know something and then you can go find out. But it's not okay to try to pretend that you know something when you don't know something.
Absolutely. And I actually think that really dovetails well with the over-preparedness point. If you are generally over-prepared, you are also kind of giving yourself the ability to say when you don't know confidently, I don't know, but I will find out. And you're not scared that you don't know it because you didn't do your part. You know you did your part. And actually that buys you a lot of credibility with your clients and with your bosses and with other people. I think the worst thing that someone can do, from my perspective, for example, if I'm trying to get information, is tell me something, then I realize they don't actually know what they were talking about. And it would have been much better if they just said, hey, I don't know, but I can find out. And then great, we're on the same page. And so I think that combination of being very prepared, but then also knowing the limits of your knowledge and being very upfront about that is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Well, we probably should turn to questions because, Margot, what time do we need to close out here? We started late, but
Yeah, so I mean, the room is available a little while longer. We would have otherwise finished at 1:15.
Oh, okay, all right.
If
fine.
the students have more questions and we add 5 minutes, let's see if that would still work, but we have a bit of time left.
I'm going to ask one more question then, and then we'll turn it over to the students. And that is, knowing what you now know, what would your tips be to law students in terms of what they should be doing in law school, or what they should, any extracurricular activities, or what courses they should take, or what would you recommend?
I think practical experience is something that is really hard to get in law school and is invaluable. So clinics, things where you can get outside the books, so to speak, and get some practical experience, whether that's any type of like supervised courtroom experience, or just working with clients, or just having some kind of real world experience. I think that's great. And will pay dividends in the future, both when you're looking for jobs, but also doing the jobs. It's just very valuable when you're in an interview to be able to talk about that practical expertise, practical experience. And again, when you're doing it, it's a lot of these things. They get just demystified that it's not rocket science, but you have to learn by doing. And it just takes some practice and some experience under your belt. So I would say look for opportunities to do that.
I agree. I think that's really helpful. In addition, going back to something that we talked a little bit about earlier, I think talking to people as much as you can, whether that's and trying to get information, whether it's from a career panel or maybe you have certain mentorship programs at the school, but not being afraid to, if you're interested in something, try to find a person who has experience there and just talk to them. You don't necessarily need to be asking them for anything in the moment if you don't have anything you want to ask for, but I've learned a lot just from reaching out to people, sometimes cold, and sometimes people won't talk to you, and that's okay too. But just seeing what people are willing to share from their experiences and kind of incorporating that into what you think about and how you think about what you want to do next going forward. Because if you can't do it yourself right now, the next best thing is talking to someone who's done it and sort of getting a sense of how they went about it.
Yeah, there's really no downside to reaching out. The worst thing that can happen, which will happen sometimes, is people won't answer. They won't return an email or a call or whatever. It'll happen, but you just talk to someone else, right? And there's no, there's just no downside to doing that, other than a little bit more time. But it's worth it. It'll pay dividends at the end.
And I'll just add something that someone told me when I was in law school is there's a lot of power to also reaching out to people and saying I'm a law student. People really like to help students. So even someone, you may not necessarily know personally or whatever, just being willing to send a cold email and see what happens. People generally really do like to see that students are interested and curious in a topic, and there really is something to be said for mentoring students in particular. And that, it was a little sad for me when I finished law school that I was no longer in that position. I was no longer a student. Nobody was going to care to help me, but you all are students, and so you have that sort of in your back pocket as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's turn it over to those in the room if you have any questions. Margot, I can't see the students completely. Can you select?
Yeah, I hid the self-use, so I'll check what it looks like for you guys. But does anyone have a question? You might have to just speak up a little so it comes through. Yep, in the back.
Congratulations, both of you on your positions. For sure, it's very important to understand how the government works and how you can work with it. It's a tremendous responsibility. Where I come from, working with the government is something that's not a foreseeable option. I remember walking from one of the cities in Michigan, Dearborn, in Dearborn, Michigan, walking past a Air Force recruiter station and wishing that could be me. That was 20 years ago, wishing that could be me. and wondering why don't we have access to such information. But getting on to what's more important, we're looking at artificial intelligence becoming the norm. So I think that's affecting your work, and you, Taylor, Farrell, and Andrea. Your day is not a structured day. You work based upon what is going on in the day. But you, Taylor Farrell, you work in an environmental installation. And I guess we're looking at facial recognition become something of the norm, and whether or not that's an infringement on civil rights and human rights is a thought that we all encounter differently.
Do you have a, okay, I was gonna say, do you have a
tell us in terms, what courses or what instruction what advice would you give to us in order to tell us how we should go about preparing ourselves for such an environment?
Wow. For my job, we touch maybe a little bit on AI and facial recognition and that type of new technology on the installation side. A lot of the civil liberties side is actually in a different office and how to deal with that. But generally speaking, I mean, I think you're correct that the department as a whole, just like industry, just like the U.S. government, has to look at these new technologies and balance the pros with the cons. I mean, the Secretary of Defense, everything that he talks about, he always talks about taking care of the people, and certainly, our service members' civil liberties is very near and dear to him. So that's something that's always going to be in the forefront that we're going to look at. At the same time, the other thing we're always talking about is the pacing challenge with China, and we can't really, not in a position where we can shy away from technologies unless there's a really good reason to do so. So it's a very delicate balancing approach that requires different parts of the department to work together, because some parts of the department are going to be commissioned with the task to really go out and exploit those new technologies, and then some parts of the department are going to be protecting civil liberties. So at some point, there's got to be a balance there, and I think that's an important job for lawyers. And maybe this kind of bridges to another discussion is collegiality, and to be able to work with lawyers in the department, elsewhere in the government or in industry, and to communicate well, to forcefully represent the position that's my job to represent, but also to understand other other perspectives and other interests, and try to help whether it's the secretary or the deputy secretary or whoever, whatever leaders, to get the right balance there.
In terms of cyber,
we're not going to talk. Thank you for your question, but we're not going to talk substantive issues.
I was just going to ask, in terms of cyber law, what courses do you think?
Okay.
That they are going to. What
they may not.
Do you think may be coming about, or do you see cyber law as being effective or a future area of law to go into, particularly from the government perspective?
Yeah, I think, I don't have much to add to Taylor's very well put response, besides to point out that, as you kind of implicitly know in your question, this is an issue that is much broader than just the Department of Defense. It's the entire government, and not just even the U.S. government, but the world and society writ large that is going to have to deal with a lot of these questions that come out of, new and emerging technology, and including cyber and all that. I'm not familiar specifically with some of the courses that are available necessarily at your school, but I'm sure there's probably some cyber related courses that could be helpful, just to provide a framework for how this really rapidly evolving area of law looks now and what it might look like in the future. I mean, I think generally in society writ large, whether it's in government, in the public sector, in the private sector, when these new sorts of technologies come out, lawyers play an important role in helping the rest of society think through and set safeguards on how we're going to use this sort of tech and how we're going to incorporate it into our society. But it's never a discussion that's over, right? It's a constantly evolving topic, and it's something that it will be different today than it was tomorrow, and again, different the day afterwards. So really, it's just learning how to think through the different types of questions versus focusing on any sort of one substance, because the substance will change, but getting a flavor for the types of questions that are posed is really important to keep in mind going forward for whatever the next round of evolution is going to be.
Okay. Yes.
Thanks.
You talked about two different tracks, the political track and the career track. It feels fairly easy to imagine a lot of the benefits from a career track in terms of stability and maybe a more stable ladder or a more organized ladder that you can climb through. When it comes to the political track, could you talk to some of the benefits that come with pursuing that over maybe a career, or even maybe not even pursuing, but what benefits you have in those roles versus more career roles? Or
Sure. So this is a question I dealt with in late 2020 when the White House asked me to leave my career job to come back and be a political and to forego some of those things that you're talking about, like stability and career civil service protection. So first of all, I will say that I had a tremendous experience as a career lawyer. I recommend that for anyone, and I think it's a great career move. For me at the time, and I think it's generally held true, getting a political appointment it's a pretty rare opportunity. There's not that many political lawyers out there, and when the president or someone on behalf of the president asks you to serve in a particular job, to do a particular thing, it's hard to say no to, and there is opportunity there to be a very small part of his vision for the country. And so when I was making that decision, I just had to think to myself, where's the place you can make the most difference, get the most fulfillment, and do the most interesting work, even if it's going to be for a limited period of time, even if I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do after this. But that's the calculus that I went through, and I think generally describes the pros and cons.
Any other questions? Okay. So I wanted to ask one other thing then, is you both worked in law firms. Do you think it's important to put your toe in a law firm for a year or two before, or at some point when you're working for the government? Does it help in any way? What's your experience in terms of working for a law firm versus public service, or as an element in improving your work in public service?
Yeah, so I went to a law firm after clerking, so I wasn't directly out of law school, and I had honestly didn't think I would start at a law firm, but as I went through law school, it kind of was the option that made the most sense for me, and I think it was a really valuable experience. I didn't do litigation; I did corporate work, which obviously is a little bit of a different track, but especially for the job that I'm in now, I learned how to very quickly manage a lot of projects that come in at very unpredictable times, with unpredictable deadlines or maybe very short-term deadlines, especially on the corporate side as a junior associate. And that was like the steepest learning curve. It wasn't necessarily even the substance, which obviously I had to learn, but figuring out, when in a law firm, you don't necessarily have one boss or even two or three. Technically, anyone who's senior to you in the firm, at least where I was, could pull you in on a project and ask for your assistance with a matter. And so kind of juggling the competing demands of different projects that are on unpredictable timelines was really good training for me as a young associate. Has really helped me going forward. In addition, I got to work on really interesting matters substantively, so that was a good thing for me. I liked the work that I was doing. And I definitely think it was a valuable experience. So I don't necessarily think that it's required. I can only speak to my experience that it did help me, but it definitely didn't hurt.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that it's a prerequisite. I've known people who've gone on to have long and very successful government service careers who started at law firms, and I've known people who have done the same, starting out in honors programs and went straight into a government job. You certainly can get valuable experience in a law firm that can help you, time management, maybe dealing with difficult people, and some interesting work. Some law firms have great training opportunities, which is hit or miss in the federal government sometimes. So, wherever you land, you make the best of it. I think that's the key takeaway. If a law firm makes the most sense for you financially or for whatever other reason, it can be a really good stepping stone to getting into a long-term federal service career. If you happen to have the fortune to get into an honors program at a federal government job, or get a job at U.S. Attorney's Office or a county prosecutor or whatever it is, that can be a good stepping stone to a great long career as well. So I think whatever works out for you, you make the most of it, learn as much as you can, get as much experience as you can, and then you try to work on some of these things that we've talked about building the skills that are going to allow you to be successful.
Okay, last question. What was your favorite course in law school?
I only amajured one class, and it was sports law. And that was my 3L year and second semester, and not particularly critical to my career path, but that was the first one that came to mind because I amajured that.
And you loved it. That's interesting.
I loved it. Yeah.
I don't know if this answer is cheating a little bit, but my favorite course was actually outside of the law school. So when I was in law school, I was allowed to take classes outside of the law school, and I think it helped me to provide some perspective. But I took a course, which I actually know some law schools teach as a version of like a legal version, but it was really focused on leadership. And it was a really interesting perspective to have while diving deep into the law, to spend a semester thinking about what are principles of leadership and how do we think through like what makes a good leader. It wasn't something that
you got credit. That was a credit course. You got credit for that.
Yeah, it was in the actually in the Foreign Affairs Institute at the same school. But I know I think some law schools have like a version of that sort of leadership in the law and how that works together in certain areas. And that's, leadership is something that's really important, but it's not something we always think about in a systematic way. So it was really interesting to spend a semester getting to do that.
I like it. I like that a lot. Well, thank you so much, both of you. We really, really appreciate the time that you took to do this. And we know you're so busy, but it's been extremely helpful. And as I said, this is recorded, so this is part of our library. So people will be able to look at this as their interest is directed this way. So we're very, very grateful. And thank you for your service. I am so happy and proud that you are both in the Department of Defense and working so hard on behalf of all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And again, I'm sorry we started late, but I really enjoyed talking, and I can't see everybody very well, but it's good to see all of you, and I wish I were back in your shoes.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.